Good morning, aviators. This is Anna Serbenenko here. Today I'm saying hi as a Chief Flight Instructor of Canadian Flight Center. And a very frequent question we get asked by the students is, can I work while being a student pilot, or a student in general? I think the better question is, should I work as a student? So first of all, consider a few things. If you are a student, you are most likely going to get a fairly basic job, probably close to the minimum wage, which these days in BC is around $17 an hour, Canadian. However you cut it, you know you can put more effort, you know that you have your classes, but you can also put this same time towards your studying, and any time that you're working, you are not studying. So even if you don't have classes, you typically do have ways of increasing your study productivity instead of being working. So I would very much recommend in the first place to consider time, and obviously the tuition you're paying, as an investment in yourself. But the time you're spending on your studying, that's the time you're investing in your future self as a professional, as a trained specialist, as a pilot, or whichever studies you are doing. So typically that time pays off. Once you finish your training as a pilot, for example, you would be getting at least 2, maybe even 3 times the minimum wage per hour. And in case of pilot training, it can be only a year from now if you do it full time. If you're spending that same week or day or month working at the minimum wage, you will trade your future time with a much better pay for the time now at the minimum wage pay. And typically it's not a good trade-off. So with no investment, you will ever get 100% a year from now. With most investments, you wouldn't. But with investing in yourself, including the time, you will get that investment that once you graduate, once you are a trained professional, your wage goes way up typically. The next thing to consider is, if you are working, you will also slow down your studies, not only in terms of the amount of time you spend immediately, but also the efficiency of the lessons that do remain. So, for example, if you're flying 5 times per week, you don't have time to forget things in between the flights, and you will most likely have every flight pretty efficient. So every next flight will be a good progress and a continuation of the previous flight without too much gap, and making progress in terms of your skills, not only the hours flown. If you take some of this time for your job, and say you're flying 2 times a week or 3 times a week instead, or even once, then you will forget things in between your flights, and you will end up spending part of your next flight remembering and rehearsing what you did the previous flight. So each next hour of flying will be less efficient if you have a longer wait, more gap. Sometimes the gap is unavoidable if the weather is not good or for some other reasons that you cannot control. But if you add to this delay between lessons, also with your unavailability, with your job on the side, your training will end up being not only longer, but also less efficient. And unfortunately, it does also translate most of the time of being more expensive. So you end up making some money on one side, and you will probably pay at least some of it back into your flight training, because the efficiency drops, the duration increases, and overall it will be a less efficient training. Now, obviously not everybody has the luxury or the privilege of not having to work for extended time during your training. So if your family is not able to support you, or if you don't have the reserve to support you, both for your tuition and your cost of living throughout your training, I would recommend looking for the jobs that do offer you the flexibility. So, for example, if you're flipping burgers in McDonald's and you're very busy serving customers, you will probably not have any time to study. On the other hand, there are jobs like security guard, house sitter, dog sitter, and obviously make sure you clarify that with your boss, but there are positions where your boss will not even mind you doing reading, studying something part of your paid time, because you are paid for the presence somewhere and not for a particular job. So every job description is different. Seek the opportunities where you are able maybe to do some training, and if your school, like we do, provides the opportunity distance learning, like with our online ground school, for example, you're able to study from anywhere. If you obviously have to show up for the flights, that's unavoidable, and you have to be at the school a certain amount of time, you are still able to do some training from wherever you are and anytime. So if you're scheduled for an evening shift and your boss is okay with you studying, join the online ground school. We provide it over Zoom. We have online materials, and this way you can minimize the setback that side job would cause you while having the benefit of making that extra cash. Bonus tip for international students, so a little bit of a history lesson. 10-15 years ago, international students were very restricted in Canada as to what they could do. They either were not allowed to work, or they were allowed to work only very limited amount of time, sometimes only on campus, which is obviously restricts your job opportunities. Then Canada switched to on or off campus, so you have more selection of jobs you can apply. And finally, lately, pretty much all the international students that we have seen in the recent few years were allowed to work up to full-time. There could have been some restrictions on the type of jobs they were allowed to do, like babysitting, I think. Again, don't quote me on that, just check your regulations and check your specific study permit. But overall, the trend that we have seen is that international students are allowed to work up to full-time on or off campus in Canada. So you would typically need to have some funds for your training, but you're also able to help your parents to pay your expenses, or help yourself to pay your expenses by taking a side job. Again, consider all the options, consider investing in yourself and fast-tracking your training. That's your best financial investment you can do, but if you don't have choice, then do what you need to do, and we are happy to help you with at least doing part of your training remotely if needed. I hope this video was helpful. Follow us on YouTube, on social, and visit the website Canadian Flight Center, cfc.aero.